Hailing back from the days of Medarot 8, this cabaret girl type is more than meets the eye and not quite what you'd expect at first glance. It is CAB00 Swallowtail, with a kit of Stealth, Heal Trap, Support Trap, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Holy Grace, which buffs all leg stats, minus armor and heavy limit, for every positive effect applied to self. Now, as another model that's been around since the relatively recent times, it is nice to see them officially join the roster of Medarot S as a model that can be collected and pulled. But compared to most other models that we have seen in recent with varying degrees of viability, nuking skill, and conventional balance, Swallowtail decides to kind of play by her own rules to a point. Stealth is a support-based skill that applies to herself and will make her untouchable and untargetable until her next turn, unless she's already being targeted. This honestly means that if she were going on the attack, any attacks that she were going to attempt while in stealth mode allow her to bypass any shields or defensive maneuvers that are in play and attack who she wants. Or if she decides to play defensive, just keep her off the radar whenever necessary. Heal Trap is a setup-based skill that, once active, will actively damage and deter any enemy targets from using any healing-based skills, and passively damage them just for using this. That can involve just basic HP restoration with Repair, restoring broken parts with Restore or even Rebirth, or even making it a punishment just using Stat Cleanse and keeping that off your back. So this can be a very good way to deter healers if used correctly, since most of the time the enemy AI will usually try not to trigger the trap if they can help it. Support Trap is also a setup skill which does the same thing, but instead to support-based skills. This can include Heater, Radar Sight, Dominion, Field Control. If it's a green skill with two shaking hands, it will punish the user for triggering the trap with passive damage over time every time it's triggered. Float Legs means that Swallowtail will have relatively solid coverage across most terrains, and she's honestly a little more conventionally balanced, I guess I can call it for lack of a better term, compared to more of the other broken Float Legs we've seen in recent. With a mobility of about 595, just shy of 600, is kind of the standard point of where most Float Legs typically like to sit. An evade of 910 isn't too shabby, but not super high either, which means she is going to be kind of relying on that stealth to kind of keep herself off the radar and keep damage low. Melee resist of 704 and a shoot resist of 816 is moderately squishy, which means that even though she's not going to die super quick, she will be taking a pretty fair amount of punish damage from any incoming attack, be it melee or shooting. And it doesn't really help her case either that she has a very low HP pool compared to most other models of the female types. This includes about 2700 HP for the head, about 2600 per arm, and about 3250 for her legs. So her HP pool isn't super high, and realistically the best way to use Swallowtail is essentially a get in and get out kind of situation, just to kind of keep damage on her as low as possible, because she is not designed to stay long, and if she does, she definitely will be overstaying her welcome. Now, to counter this, Swallowtail is capable of a meta change form, where she will flip herself 180 degrees and take on a more grandiose appearance, for lack of a better term, and her little robotic pet becomes a necklace and shoulder wrap in this case. In this form, she exchanges her kit out for a purely support-based one, with a kit of Heater, Cooler, Field Control, Float Legs also, but she changes her leg ability to Charm, which reduces incoming damage taken from enemies of the opposite gender. And since a good chunk of models do tend to be male in variety, this can mean she can keep damage moderately low by herself once she is capable to transform. In this mode, however, Heater will grant about 20% or so bonus to heat stats across the board to herself and all allies, which means running to the line they will be just a little bit faster than most. Drive B Cooler means it'll do essentially the same thing but to the cool stat, which means running from the center line back to start, they will also be running just a little bit faster than normal. Field Control is another support skill that once activated will allow any compatible legs on the terrain to have their heavy limit pumped up to 3. Now normally this skill can kind of be slept on a lot because you generally try not to overload your legs at all. Because if you are, you're probably not building something right, or you probably just genuinely wasn't paying attention. but field control honestly is a good way to curb this in the heat of the moment if you just have that temporary lapse of judgment. Her HP pool is pretty much the same as before at about 11k overall, almost 11.2 in this case. So her HP pool is going to be moderately squishy, but her stats do buff themselves just a little bit in this case. With a new mobility of 697, she will be just a hair faster than normal, but this also is not including any buffs to heat or cool that she can apply to herself, but just by herself before any other buffs come in. Melee resist and shoot resist of 952 and 996 each are just a little bit better than they were before, so she's not going to die as quickly or take as much punish damage, but she is still definitely going to try to do her best to stay off the radar where possible. And an evade of 1435 definitely will help keep her on her toes and make it harder for foes to catch her. And that being said, as a pure set score, I do have to rate Swallowtail a pretty solid 6.5 out of 10. Even though a very niche and very dominantly support-based model like this technically is one you don't really want to use often in battle without some kind of reason for doing so, Swallowtail kind of makes it work, especially as a passive aggressor in this case. And especially more so if the enemy is using healing or support-based skills, because she can essentially apply 3 buffs to herself between heater, cooler, and field control, change back into normal mode, and already have those 3 buffs massively boosting her leg stats overall thanks to the Holy Grace ability. So she can kind of benefit herself in this case too if used correctly. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her much lower actually at about a 4.5 out of 10. Primarily because she is very, very squishy compared to most other models, especially support-based ones. And granted that you can't use support trap and heal trap in the same field, you're forced to pick one or the other in this case, which makes using her a little more of a hassle and more of a gamble than actually considering using her than a pure set.